This video is made possible by our loyal Patreon supporters. Visit patreon.com/Psychetruth.
Hey, it's Corrina, your virtual health coach, and today I want to talk to you about 5 common causes of anxiety and some simple tricks and tips you can implement to hopefully reduce the effect of these common causes. So before I start today, I would love for you to chime in down in the comments section below and let me know, what is your biggest trigger of anxiety? Or if you have a question you'd like me to address in the next video or topic request even, I always love hearing from you guys, and it's really helpful when you let me know the things that you experience in your life so that I can address them in my future videos. So as unpleasant as anxiety feels, I want you to remember that the physiological response that triggers us to feel anxiety is actually there as part of our survival mechanisms. So our subconscious is constantly kind of scanning through all of the input we're taking in throughout the day, and it's trying to notice if there's a potential threat to our survival. And when it interprets something as a threat to our survival, it triggers that response of anxiety and stress. So we get all of this cortisol and adrenaline, things that would help us to fight or flight. But oftentimes in our modern day ages, we're not actually having to fight or flight from things, and we're actually triggering that response of anxiety with things like being really stressed out in traffic or feeling like we don't have enough time to get all the things done that we need to do. And while that physiological stress response is really there trying to help us, it ends up only making us feel worse. So one of the simplest things that can start to trigger that survival response and maybe trigger a sense of panic in the body is our blood sugar level. So when our blood sugar level gets way too low, or if we're just on a roller coaster of blood sugar where we spike the blood sugar up really high with something like refined carbohydrates, potato chips, or sugar, and then the body tries to overcompensate and it swoops back down, making our blood sugar get really low. This is the blood sugar roller coaster. And that alone can be a big trigger for anxiety. So it's easy to understand why our body would panic when our blood sugar level gets too low. But it's important to understand that the body also goes into a panic when our blood sugar level is way too high. So again, if we're doing that blood sugar spike, blood sugar fall, this roller coaster, then now you're really making a bad recipe for anxiety because you're gonna be triggering that panic every time you eat and put your blood sugar level up too high, and then after you've gone too long without eating and it goes too low. So a few ideas on how to remedy this situation. Number 1 is just simply not skipping your meals and noticing if maybe you've gone too long without eating. Sometimes when we feel really busy and really overwhelmed, we'll actually just forget to eat. But unfortunately, that's only going to make everything worse. So now we don't have the blood glucose that we need in order to make good decisions and be thinking well, but we're also kind of sending the body into a panic because it doesn't know when the next meal is coming. So eat your breakfast, carry healthy snacks with you when you're on the run, and just bring your attention to trying to not let your blood sugar go too low simply because you're forgetting to eat. And when it comes to reducing those blood sugar spikes, this would mean things like avoiding refined sugar, avoiding drinking sodas, and remembering that things like white bread and potato chips can also cause that big blood sugar spike that we're trying to avoid. By eating healthy, natural foods, things with lots of fiber, things with lots of healthy fats and protein, these types of foods are gonna help have a much more reasonable effect on your blood sugar level and help take you off of that blood sugar roller coaster. The second common cause of anxiety I want to talk about is limited breath. So most of the time when we're not paying attention to our breathing, and especially when we start feeling overwhelmed by all of these other things we have to do, our default posture tends to look something like this. hunched over. Maybe we're sitting at a desk, we're typing, and then we're even more kind of concave and crunched over like this. Or maybe we're driving for long periods of time. And the whole take-home message I want you to get is that when you're sitting this way, you're completely collapsing in on this really important part of the body that provides breath to the whole rest of your body. And when we start thinking about that whole aspect of when the body is interpreting a potential threat to its survival, limited oxygen intake is a really scary thing for the body. And so the more that our default is this kind of slouched, hunched, shallow breathing, the more that we're kind of giving this kind of constant worry or threat to the body. So my tip here is to just start noticing when you're in this really collapsed posture. And the more that you just start to notice yourself doing that and then correcting it by sitting up tall, you'll start to make this habit of noticing your posture. And if we can get your default posture to be this, then that's going to be a really good step in the right direction. Now, when you first start getting used to noticing your posture and trying to correct your posture, you're going to notice that maybe it actually makes your back feel more sore to be trying to sit up straight. But it's just because those muscles have probably gotten pretty weak over the course of your life where you've not been maybe paying as much attention to those muscles. But the more that you start to notice your posture and just try to sit up straight on a regular basis, these muscles of the back will actually strengthen. And over time, it'll become easier and easier to sit up straight, and it won't cause that kind of nagging pain that can happen when we're first trying to get out of a common habit and reinforce this new healthier habit of sitting up straight and tall. Another little helpful trick is that if your knees are below your hips, that's going to make it easier for you to sit up straight and tall. So if you're sitting in a low chair and your knees actually come up higher than your hips, you're going to find it's really, really difficult for you to sit up straight. But if you can either lift your chair up or sit on a pillow to elevate your hips and let your knees fall a little bit lower, that's going to make it a lot easier to sit up straight. The third common cause of anxiety I want to talk about is decision fatigue. So oftentimes throughout the course of our day, even the tiniest little decisions like what to eat for lunch or whether to take the back way home or the highway home, it's like every single decision becomes more and more difficult to make. Now, it's important to remember that using our mental faculties actually does use up a lot of energy. And even if it feels like we've just been sitting around all day or we're working from home and maybe we didn't even have to do very much physical activity to get to work, there's still a lot of energetic demand that comes from making decisions. And especially if you have a very mentally demanding job, you'll maybe even notice this more. So my remedies for this, number one is to try and reduce the number of decisions that you're gonna have to make throughout the day. So this could be something like picking out your outfit the night before and having it all laid out, or preparing your breakfast, preparing your lunch the night before. Anything you can do to just reduce the number of decisions you're going to have to make that day can really, really help. And especially when you know that you have an especially stressful day ahead of you, do as much as you can the night before to try and be prepared and reduce the number of decisions that you're going to have to make during that stressful day. Some people will even go so far as to wear the exact same thing every single day, just so that they're reducing the number of decisions that they have to make. Now, if you are already in a state of anxiety and stress, then planning ahead is not a tip you can really implement right now. But what you can do is just let people know that you're feeling some decision fatigue. Oftentimes, we can end up in long conversations that often can turn into arguments simply because we can't agree on something. And if you just let someone know ahead of time that you would prefer for them to just make the decision for you, oftentimes that will be a great way to kind of nip that argument in the bud and save you from having to make even one more decision. Number 4 is judgments. And this applies both to the judgments that we pass on other people, and maybe even more so about the judgments that we pass on ourselves. So all throughout the day, we are just being confronted with tons of decisions, tons of information, and remember that our subconscious mind is kind of just trying to, take in all of that information and then notice the things that can be potential threats to our survival and respond accordingly. So when we're feeling really overwhelmed and a lot of anxiety, there tend to be a lot of different thoughts and emotions that are kind of on this super highway that feels like is going on in our brain. And what can happen a lot of times is we'll have these judgments about ourselves, and the subconscious won't realize that that's just a judgment and it's not a truth. So our subconscious will actually maybe respond to one of those thoughts and respond with that panic or stress response, even though it was not really warranted by that particular thought. So maybe one of the most common examples is the thought, I can't do this. I can't do this, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm not smart enough. And these types of judgments on ourselves not only make us feel bad about ourselves, but they can also kind of trigger that stress response as your subconscious doesn't realize that that is not a true statement. So your subconscious hears something like, I'm not strong enough, I'm not fast enough, I'm not smart enough. And it can kind of trigger that surge of cortisol and surge of stress hormones, even though that's not an accurate statement, right? It's not that you can't do the thing. It's not that you actually aren't physically strong enough to do the thing. So the kind of remedy for this, first of all, is just to start noticing our self-judgments. And this can be a little bit of a challenge at first. But the more that you start to just notice these things and notice those thoughts as they come up, that is the first step in being able to kind of rewrite our self-talk and change those statements into things that are more positive. So when you start hearing those self-judgments like, I can't do this, I never can get anything done, I'm not smart enough for this, or whatever it might be, right? Because different situations are going to kind of bring up different self-judgments. But recognize that a self-judgment does not help you complete the task, and it can actually make you feel even worse than the feeling of that judgment feels on its own. So the more that we can just start noticing these judgments that we're making on ourselves, we can start to rewrite our inner dialogue, and we'll find that not only are we feeling better moment to moment, but we can actually significantly reduce the anxiety that we feel when we're doing something stressful, because we're not thinking these negative thoughts about ourselves and triggering the subconscious to panic without even meaning to. So this actually dovetails pretty well into the 5th common cause of anxiety, and that is the illusion that we don't have enough time. Now, I just want to start by saying that yes, it is true that oftentimes life just happens so that we end up with not nearly enough time to get all the things done that we need to do. And I will tell you, I've been in that situation so many times. But what doesn't help that situation when we inevitably find ourselves in that situation, right? You have a really long to-do list of things you have to get done in a day. But when we're thinking thoughts like, I don't have enough time, there's no way I can finish this today, we're actually letting those kind of self-judgments again, or maybe this is more of an external judgment, right? A judgment on the time or a judgment on the too many things we have to do. But those thoughts don't help the situation. And those thoughts can actually trigger that anxiety response. And now we've made it 10 or 100 times more difficult to get all of those things done. So in the same way that we want to start bringing our attention to those self-judgments and negative things we say to ourselves, we can also start to notice those other thoughts that we have that just aren't actual truth. So what I mean is that there's an actual truth, like I have 3 hours to complete these tasks. But that's different than the thought, I don't have enough time. So just starting to maybe notice how often we're kind of thinking these limiting thoughts and just bringing more attention to them and replacing them with a truth, right? So when you hear yourself saying, God, I don't have enough time to finish this, maybe just rephrase, I have exactly 3.5 hours to finish this. Or maybe even turning it upside down. I have plenty of time to get all of these things done. And the more that I approach these things in a calm and relaxed manner, the easier that it'll be to get them all done. And maybe even have plenty of time to spare. I know for myself personally that I've started to notice the way that external factors can actually make me feel more anxious. So what I mean is this. When we are watching commercials or TV, billboards, whatever, oftentimes those people putting those things out are trying to sell you something, right? So they're actually trying to make you feel like you're not enough without that thing. There's also this aspect of, horror movies, for example, where we do kind of get this exhilarating, sometimes entertaining feeling when we're put into that really kind of scary, anxious response. But there's a safety of that happening when we're just watching it on a movie, right? But what I want you to recognize is that stress response that is kind of purposefully invoked in us by TV, by commercials, by movies, by whatever, is actually something that doesn't help us in our normal day-to-day lives, especially when we're trying to adult and stuff like that. So if we can start to notice when those external factors are making us feel bad about ourselves, or are making us feel like we don't have enough time, or we don't have enough money, or we don't have enough this or that, just starting to notice those things and recognizing that you can rewrite the narrative in your mind. I do have enough time. You know what? I am smart enough. I am strong enough. We can actually rewrite our lives into this much happier and less anxious state of being. So these are the 5 common causes of anxiety that I have noticed in my life and that I've actually feel like I'm making steps towards reducing in my life. But let me know, what is your biggest trigger for anxiety? Let me know what you thought about the tips and information that I shared today, and any other questions or topic requests that you would like me to address in a future video. I'm going to do an entire video all about improving our posture and improving our ability to take more full breaths. So be sure that you subscribe and click the little bell so that you can join me for that video. And I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Many of our subscribers don't see our videos. Make sure that you click the notification bell. And if you haven't already, follow us on social media for tips, tutorials, giveaways, and daily inspiration.
Wellness Plus is available on Amazon, which you can stream from your home on your phone, tablet, or TV. Join Wellness Plus today and get your first 7 days free.